Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that our next live stream is on October 13th, and it's on Thanksgiving. And it starts at 4 p.m. Pacific time or 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then we're also hosting a meetup here at Foundation Center West. And it's on the topic of innovation on October 20th. Hopefully we see some of you guys there, and even folks that are local on the live stream, feel free to join us. I'd like to introduce somebody who's no stranger to Foundation Center, Lisa Hoffman, coach consultant. She's going to be discussing moving your board from good to great today, so please join me in welcoming her.
Always good to be with you all, and hi to our live stream audience. And I'm very delighted to introduce Sabrina Hersi-Issa, and I've been looking for a few years for an excuse to do something together. And there are many reasons why I asked Sabrina to do this with me. Just to tell you a little bit about her, she is a technologist, and she literally travels around the world working with various groups on communications, technology, social media, and being exquisitely effective in those areas. So the other reason that I invited Sabrina is she is chair of the Exhale board, and their website link is in the materials that were sent to you. And in reflecting on this segment, strong leadership is key to a good board, and especially a great board. And Sabrina and I, along with Aspen Baker, Executive Director of Exhale, who is with us today, are moving Exhale's board from good to great. So we're going to really talk about how we're doing that. And so thank you for joining us, Sabrina. And I wanted to, excuse me, live stream audience, get a quick sense of how many people are board members here. Okay, so about half. Executive directors. Okay, about a third. Probably the rest are development or other level staff. Yeah. And I wish I could pull you live stream audience, but I can't. So I want to talk a little bit about what you can expect today, and then we want to hear what you'd like to leave with. We hope that you'll have a sense of the characteristics of a great board, and also develop a sense of where your board is on kind of the good to great scale, and 2 or 3 steps you can take when you get back to your office to start moving your board in that direction, and an idea of the commitment required to grow your board in that way. And so a couple of ground rules. Some people might give examples that, actually I just realized we're being live streamed, so never mind. I was going to say this is like Las Vegas, let's keep it confidential, but you know what? That horse is out of the barn. So what I ask is you put your devices on vibrate, and unless you are tweeting about this event that, you know, you went to the trouble to come here, so why not be present? I am also a Zen priest, so that's what I teach and support. And that's what you'll hear. We're going to have a couple of very brief exercises, which I've adapted for our live stream folks. And we wanted to start with just hearing a few expectations you have, what you'd like to leave with. And live stream folks, please email to Natasha, and she will share what you'd like to leave with as well. So just going to get a few key expectations. Hands? No expectations, you're all Zen masters.
All set.
Yes.
How to quickly integrate new board members.
So quickly integrate new board members. Okay. Yes.
How to graciously integrate.
That's another workshop, and I'm not sure that'll be live streamed. So graciously move board members off the board. Okay. Yes.
Finding the right people for your board to make the connection that you need to come to.
So recruiting the right people. And also kind of door openers. Okay, 1 or 2 more. Yes.
How to empower a
anything from our live stream folks? Natasha? No? Okay, so they are Zen masters. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add that's burning? Yes.
After years of kind of rote meetings, how do I as an ED kind of shift them up with more conversations?
So rote meetings, dynamic meetings.
I've got a few from the live stream.
Okay.
How to take your board from non-fundraisers to fundraisers. How to have our board interact with our libraries.
Yeah.
How to keep an overtapped board engaged. Got the best recruitment techniques. And then how to integrate a new director into an existing board who had a bad experience with the previous director.
So an ED, a new ED integrated with a existing board that had a difficult experience with the previous ED. Excuse my handwriting. My mother was always a little disappointed I didn't become a doctor. Although the Zen priest thing kind of made it up. Okay. So, some of these expectations we'll address indirectly, and if there's time at the end, we'll just kind of go through your list and give you ideas about what you'd like to leave with. Some will address directly. Some of these I would categorize, I would hope, would be part of a good, fairly well-functioning board already, but don't feel bad about yourselves. Most boards are struggling. So we'd like you to turn to your neighbor and just talk for a couple of minutes about the characteristics of a great board, and don't use the packet and cheat. So just agree on two characteristics that you would associate with a really great board. Live stream audience, please just reflect on it and make your list, or grab someone from a nearby office and make them participate in the live stream. So just really quick, when you hear the bell, we'll come back together. Don't worry if you've only hit on one characteristic of a great board.
It's generative already.
Now again, I'm talking right away.
These are really good questions, the expectations.
Oh, they're very good questions. It's a little bit of a different workshop. Oh. How to best utilize board members as just So what I was thinking is that we could try and integrate some of their expectations into our responses as they fit. Okay. You know, but it is a little different than kind of what we talked about in planning, but they are really great. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's start with our live stream audience this time. Do we have any great board characteristics from our live stream audience? And let's do one per customer. Otherwise, we'll get all the great board characteristics and nobody else will be able to contribute anything. Okay, so let me see, show of hands. One great board member characteristic.
Committed to the mission of the organization.
Yes.
I like the word passion. should burn with the mission of the organization. Yes?
Maybe not an expert on fundraising, but someone who's willing to tell the story of the organization from the heart place.
Willing to tell the story from the heart. Okay? Yes?
Willingness or ability to play well with classmates.
Yes! Yes! You know, when I advise people, groups on what I like to call rigorous recruitment, the two top characteristics are passion for the mission and plays well with others. Let me see if someone knew. Anyone? Yes?
We talked about enthusiastic engagement, so not always seems to be the word, but also
So enthusiastic, sort of internal, external engagement. Okay. Yes. Communication. Communication, informal and formal. That's right, and how communication happens outside the board meeting will tell you a lot about the healthy board. I don't know if any of you have ever had experiences with boards that make a decision and then it gets undermined between board meetings. Anything from our live stream? Okay, yeah.
We have many responsive and generous with time and opinions. More mission.
Hold on.
I was reiterating.
Generous with time and opinions. As long as they know it's just their opinions.
Yeah.
Lots of
Willingness to take on responsibility and go beyond the call.
take on responsibility, go beyond the call. Okay, let's have two more.
They attend board meetings without being begged.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's a little bit my boyfriend's Grady doesn't beat me category. But I know that's a problem for enough groups. Okay.
And self-aware.
Yes.
Along with plays well with others, I think grown-ups are kind of a good subcategory too. Anyone else?
Diversity.
Diversity. All right. Anything else? Yes.
I like the 100% board giving, even if it's to the business of
Okay. I agree with all of your characteristics. And the way we've discussed this workshop and planned it, what I hope you'll leave with is a sense of how to move a board into this level of commitment and functioning. And we're going to do our best to specifically integrate the various expectations that you've articulated. So we'll try to be really direct about that whenever we can be. And we encourage you to ask questions. So we're actually going to start at the beginning because how board members are recruited has everything to do with what kind of board they are. To the point of the individual who asked about quickly integrating new board members and recruiting the right people, board owners. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Sabrina for a few minutes, who's going to talk about rigorous recruitment, one of our favorite topics.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to be here with all of you and to be around leaders who care about doing better and growing their organizations and making them stronger. When we were talking about doing this workshop, I felt really privileged because I was onboarded and brought on to the board, Exhale's board, in a really intentional, thoughtful way. And Lisa Hoffman was a huge part of that. And so I felt very set up for success. And that is a very a huge contrast to other boards that I've sat on, and it's why it was such a outlier experience. So I want to just start by saying the first way you can move your board from good to great is to have clear expectations and a process and a structure on how board members are brought onto your organization and introduced to the leaders of the organization, other leaders who sit on the board, and a lot of that is about just asking if it's your first day of school, where are the bathrooms? How do you know everyone's names? It's like, what are the very much essentials to making someone feel at home in your home? What is it? Food, air, water, those basics. So one of the things that we did really well was I felt as if I was brought onto this board and there was no surprises. There was very clear accountability and intentionality through every process, every conversation that I had of what was expected to me as a board member. They were moving from a place where they were making clear very much development goals and leadership goals, and those were articulated to me, and in our conversations we could see whether or not there was alignment. And if there was an alignment, like, no love is lost, like, I wish you well, I want you guys to win, maybe you can find someone else, but there was alignment, and along every single stop along the way you could see that there's a place for somebody's leadership at the table. So that is another question that I would, in your recruitment process, is where are the chairs at the table? Are there places for people to step in and be leaders at your organization? Are you clearly making spaces for people who have skills or meet the needs of your organizations? Do you know the needs of your organizations? Can you articulate them clearly to someone who is coming in blind? A lot of times people are like, fish don't know that they're wet. You assume that, all of my problems are known already, but like, if you're talking to someone who has clear leadership in another sector, who can bring those skills and apply them to your work, can you articulate them in a language that is accessible, that makes sense, that is in English, so that they can imagine themselves applying their skills to your problems or to your mission. And then the other piece that I thought was very clear is that there was a very clear accountability process of, like, what was expected to me as a board member. And again, I go back to the fact that, like, I really deeply appreciated that there was no surprises. Like, these are our meetings. If you cannot make the meetings, you can, these are the ways, numbers that you can miss before we're going to have a conversation about whether or not there's space in your life for this, to be a leader in this role. And like, it's a very adult way of going about things that was very clearly articulated, so that if you don't meet that bar, it's not personal. It is very much an adult, like, pragmatic way of looking at, like, here are the needs, this is where we're trying to go, this is where I think that you can help us lift up to get there, and there's alignment, and should there be bumps along the way, this is how we're going to address turbulence. So is that a good kind of recap? I think the other piece that I thought was very sharp with my experience is the fact that the process, the question about how do you integrate new members, I want to reframe that and just say that the change is evergreen. Like, integration actually never stops. You're always going to be building a culture of shifting culture in an organization. The culture is never actually done. So when you're bringing in new people, you have to be aware of the group dynamics and how new voices and new energies affect how well or not well the group is moving forward. So there is kind of like macro awareness that you need to have as you're onboarding new board members, and just know that you're never really finished. So
I'm going to do a couple things. I want to point out some tools that we use, and that, from what I see, great boards use some variation of in recruiting and onboarding board members. And I also wanted to really underscore what you just said, which is that a board, like a nonprofit, like a staff, is a dynamic, ever-changing organism. So we need to always be relating and adjusting. There's a new big grant that has an impact on the board, the staff, the organization, and how are we going to actively work with that impact and make room and adjust to that big new grant. So a couple of things. On page 12 of your packet with all the, and then on page 13, page 12 is an overview of a sample rigorous recruitment process. And I wanted to make just a couple of comments about it. One is that it is a process that reflects the level of commitment that Exhale and other great boards I work with actually expect of the people who join their boards. So the process is thoughtful. There is a leadership application questionnaire that people fill out. If you want a sample of that or the matrix that they use to look at where the board is and what kind of skill sets, other characteristics are needed in your board members, email me and I'll send you samples. And so we want a recruitment process that will support people who do burn a passion for the mission and can prioritize the organization, and that, to Sabrina's point, if they can't, they'll realize through the process itself, this is more than I can commit to. And that has happened, or we have realized we've needed to help them see that they really can't commit to the organization, and then we have a kind and honest conversation about that. And I've been really impressed how that's been handled at Excel. On page 13 is a sample tool that lays out core criteria and then annual priorities for board members. And it sounds really simple, but to really discuss what are the criteria that we're always going to want in our board members that really reflect our values and the kind of culture and board we want. And that's what the core criteria is. And then priorities really encourage a deep look at the board, at the organization in an ongoing way, and especially preparing for recruitment, and saying, well, what do we need in this year's board? So some years, this is actually real criteria priorities, not Exhale's, another organization that was really struggling in a big way around sustainability and needing a board that actually understood its finances. And so you'll see that that's a priority.
And I do want to say, I want to add two things. One, I want to say that a lot of times people will see themselves in the characteristics of the criteria, but in your process, you have to be able to have a conversations to make sure how they see themselves is actually reflective in reality and rooted in a lot of times people will say, I'm great at fundraising, I'm awesome at it, but their actual last fundraising experience was, 15 years ago for, their niece's Girl Scout troop, or it's actually not that skill, that experience. Yes, you were great at that experience. That is not applicable to this one. You know what I'm saying? So to make sure there's actually a true translation of that. And then the other piece, you mentioned that we have this application process that we call a leadership questionnaire. If that is something you choose to do and apply, actually do it. And if you ask people for references, actually call them. A lot of times, I've applied for things and I just know they never call my references, which in my eyes diminishes how seriously they take actually vetting the talent that's going to be in charge of the governance and the financial health of the organization.
So I'm guessing some of you are saying, who would ever join a board where this is what we put them through just to recruit them? But I think, the two of us and also Aspen are here to tell you that people do join boards that have this kind of approach to recruitment, and they respect those boards and organizations. And it may mean recruitment is a little slower, but it also means rather than saying, I'll start working with a client and the CEO or the board chair will say, we have a board of 18. And I'll say, well, how many come to meetings? And they'll say 7. This kind of recruitment process doesn't guarantee, but you really do end up primarily with board members who are committed and are clear on their commitment. One of the things I wanted to add, and please jump in, is one of the key ways that we articulate expectations is in series of discussions. At Exhale and many of the groups I work with, there's an actual interview process of new board members, and also with written materials, so a very clear board job description. And many of the boards I work with have governance policies that they'll actually share with a potential board member to give them a bigger overview of what's expected.
When you're presenting new information to prospective board members, people you're recruiting, or new board members that you're bringing on, also be mindful of how you're giving them that information. A lot of times people just be like, here's our massive binder of stuff, and like, when will you ever? Like, it is, no, like, so what I appreciate about this is the process that Exhale has architected, is that I felt as if I was getting like information, exactly what I needed when I needed along the process. Eventually there was a binder, but it came at a time when I was like all in, and I sat and actually, it's the only binder I've ever read. Other times I've been at orgs where like I leave with just stacks of binders. So it's like if you're presenting water hoses of information, and to people who are excellent leaders will not have time and won't prioritize absorbing that information.
So I wanted to add, and then I'm going to ask if there are any questions about recruitment, because that's really the foundation of the house of the board. So the quickly integrating new board members, it really starts with how people are recruited. And the question I always ask, not as playfully as Sabrina, is if I'm joining a board, if I'm a new board member, what do I need to know to hit the ground running? And that's the recruitment process actually starts providing that foundation, and then it moves to onboarding and orientation, which we're going to get to in a little bit. I wondered, either live stream or live, do any questions for Sabrina in particular about recruitment? Yes.
Sometimes a board member is great in many different ways. The only problem is that they have either another organization that they're a staff member of or a board member of that may be trying to suction away some of their ability to give or participate fully. So I'm wondering if this comes up.
Oh yeah, I would say in those instances to then have a conversation about that. One of the other orgs that I sit on, they don't take government funding, and everyone else who sits on the board are very senior level people who also have to raise money for their programs that also don't take government funding. So when that is something that we talk about, like, okay, if you cannot show up in this explicit way, how can that then, or do you need us to write statements to your job to make sure that there are clear, to draw the lines on conflicts of interest? And in that other case, we were completely able to do that. But you had to have the conversations, otherwise it's very awkward very fast.
Transparency, yeah. Carol, and then Al.
So my question, I have two questions. They're totally different.
Let's keep it to your most important question.
So in recruiting for diversity, my organization is representing a very diverse community, but the board is mostly like white. And they've been really struggling trying to get diversity in the board. And I just wonder if you can tell us about how you do that. And I went through one process with them where we had amazing candidates and we're all white. And then we didn't really have that many diverse candidates. So you would, we'd have to go out in the community, find some, bring them in, and onboard them, which is great. But have you had like quotas, or I mean it's a little touchy, and yet we really have that goal of a diverse board.
Yeah, to have your board reflect the communities that you're serving is one, admirable, and to be unapologetic about it is also something you should do, and have your board members doing that as well. Your board members are your best ambassadors for recruitment. With diversity specifically, I think it's about intentionality and how young and diverse and different talent is being surfaced and introduced to the organization. A lot of times that involves, I don't know what specifically you do, but it involves, having opportunities for lower price pointed hosted fundraisers where you get new energy, new people, new voices, and then seeing from there who shows up and kind of like, hey, let's get coffee afterwards or what have you. But a lot of times it starts with the board members being willing to not just talk to the people in their most immediate circles and saying, hey, I serve this organization that really cares about reflecting back, like having our top leadership reflect back to communities we serve, and then having those conversations with their communities and circles beyond that. So.
I have something to add, which is more fundamental, and that is, I think a question organizations often don't ask that's deeper is, do our programs relate to, are they relevant to diverse communities? And if they're not, people are a token to a board. So I think that's a really fundamental, and it's a painful question that needs to be asked, because I see that with boards that try to recruit, more diverse boards, and quite often potential board members ask, well, this doesn't really relate to my community, so why would I join your board? And of course, many missions relate to a variety of communities, but I think it's a good question to ask.
And also it's worth asking, this is even harsher, is your board actually saying they're open to diverse leadership, or are they actually hostile to it? And then in that case, as a Black person, we all talk to each other and we know. And so a little bit don't. You know what I'm saying? And that's actually just worth more kind of,
So we're going to go to Al, and then I have a live stream question.
Is there such a thing, or is it, can you give us an idea of what an average recruitment process, how long it takes? Are we talking 3 months, 6 months, a year, or is it just dependent on each individual recruiting?
So Al wants to know, how long does the typical process take? One element of it needs to be ongoing, which is you have a spreadsheet, or maybe in your CRM database, you have an area where you are constantly entering the names of potential board members. And then I think it's most effective when recruitment is cyclical. So you have a more active time of the year that's usually a 6-month window where you then look at all those names, you begin to vet them, you find out from the person who put the name in the hat, are they ready to be recruited because they have the passion for the mission, they know about us? Are they more medium? We need to bring them a little closer, suss out their interest. Are they long shots? We'd love to have them on the board. We have a distant door opener. We don't really know how deeply our mission would resonate. And then your active cycle is described in the packet, so I'm not going to go through it step by step. But I would say it needs to be ongoing, and I would move towards a cyclical time of year when you recruit. And obviously, if you identify a hot board member that's out of cycle, that would really add a lot to the board to make an exception.
Yeah, and I would also add that as a board chair and an active recruiter, I feel like I'm a sports agent, and that I'm always scanning the field. If there's someone who wrote a really great article yesterday, 2 days ago, someone wrote a really sharp Facebook comment, and I was like, wait a minute. And then the other piece, as a newer board member, it's just always great to be brought on as part of a cohort. So you have other newbies that you can build relationships with who also don't know where the bathroom is.
So we've actually just answered the first question from our live stream. Do we keep a list of folks we eventually want to have on the board? And then there's a question about the best method of cold calling someone we'd like on the board who you've never interacted with, maybe an affluent alumni. Any ideas about that?
I would say new talent that you surface probably through acting like a sports agent, and you think they would be a great potential board member. I would say to then find cool ways to engage them with the organization. If you have staff members going to a conference, invite that person to speak on a panel about a specific thing that might dovetail with the mission of the organization and that person's leadership. Have them co-author a piece with your ED for the organization's blog. So it's that way, it's not a cold, it's a warmer kind of introduction, and you signal to them, I see you, I think you are smart, and I think you have something to say and something to contribute. And then it's like porch, it's like dating.
So we're gonna move on, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what I would call operating principles of great boards. So hopefully you're building your foundation of a really intentional, rigorous approach to recruitment. And I'm happy to say that the first operating principle on our list is being mission-driven, having a passion for the mission. And that is kind of a North Star for boards. So when there are conflicts and difficulties, the mission is a driving and grounding way of navigating choppy waters. Anything you want to add to that? Oh, okay. The other thing is, and I'm resisting the urge to get up and pace because that's what I like to do. I want to talk about leadership. I had mentioned that one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this workshop with Sabrina is because good and great boards, like the Good to Great book about you have the right people on the bus, starts with leadership. And if you don't have clear, strong leadership that really understands their board role and their leadership role, you're not going to move forward very much. So that is kind of a principle and a quality of great boards, that there is a recognition of the importance of leadership, and that there is a pipeline for leaders, and that consists of how you recruit. So that's why we call at Exhale our board application the leadership questionnaire, and that you use committees and task forces both to audition potential board members if it's a committee where you can have non-board members, and you are cultivating leadership. And we're going to give you ideas about how to do that throughout the rest of the discussion. So every board member is a leader of the organization, and how you guide the organization and partner with your executive director, your CEO. The entire board has made a commitment and is responsible for the organization's well-being. And then your board chair and your officers are leaders of the board and point the board in the direction it needs to move in around the organization, whether it's the strategy, the finances, and the board's own health and effectiveness.
Yeah. And I would say one of the other expectations somebody said is how do you empower the board? And I would also offer that strong social change leaders are empowered already, and how they show up and be able to demonstrate their leadership is sort of set up with how your board is structured. So needing to ask that question kind of already answers maybe you don't have the right board member in that space. Because an attribute of leadership is understanding that things don't have to be done the way they've always been done, and that includes your board leadership. So people who actively take responsibility for seeing problems and addressing them. And also a really great question that we've started asking internally with our board is strong leaders know how to enjoy challenges, but also are self-aware enough to know how do they want to grow? How do you want to grow in this role to meet this challenge? And it's a conversation that is necessary to have, because then you know how they're going to show up to help lift up the work that you're trying to do together.
Right. And I would say most of the expectations that you've articulated relate to strong leadership, both the board as a whole and a strong chair and officers. When you look at graciously moving people off the board, having a strong, let's say, integrating a strong recruitment process to your existing board really sends a message that we are upping our game. Here are our expectations. My experience is that board members who need to move off a board will often do that because they actually don't want to work that hard, or the expectations that you are clarifying and setting are not how they want to function. And that can actually be handled with communication very graciously. You know, it's a win-win, because why should someone who agreed to be on a different kind of board continue? But that, again, requires partnership from your CEO, between your CEO and your chair, as well as engagement by the board. What kind of board do we want to be? You know, how do we want, what are our values? What's our culture?
All plus ones. Two thumbs up. I speak with our ED a tremendous amount of time. It's like my most contacts in my phone is my mom and then Aspen. Yes.
1 second, can we let Sabrina
So
finish?
that's
And I need to repeat your questions for the live stream audience. How do we feel about term limits? We are pro-term limits. And for those of you who think, but I have this perfect board member who gives $25,000 a year, why would I ever let them off the board?
they can still get $25,000 a year.
A board needs to be refreshed, and most boards I know with term limits have a provision where someone can, after a year, be invited back on the board, and then you keep them close. So the other characteristic of really great boards is they are clear on their purpose, and I like to frame their purpose in three ways. The boards are stewards. They are representing the community, making sure that the organization's mission stays relevant to the community, stays fresh and strong, and that all of the resources that the organization uses in service of its mission are used wisely and respectfully. Whether it's financial resources, whether it is strategic planning, whether it is staffing. So the board's role is to steward the organization in that way, and to do it in a way that empowers staff to do a great job in their leadership role in the organization. So that may mean that the board makes sure that salaries stay competitive within the nonprofit market, setting policy, looking at where other organizations are, and then they get out of the way because it's up to management, it's up to leadership, staff leadership, to deal with individual employees. So with a nod to Tim Wolford, who is a long-term member of the Compass Point staff, on page 3 is actually Compass Point's governance and support model, which I think is a really wonderful, helpful frame of the board's purpose and role. And basically, as a group, as a team, you are stewarding or governing the organization, and you can see when you look down the governance column that all of the resources that I mentioned are included in what you steward the board on, whether it's financial, whether it is hiring and evaluating a CEO, whether it's planning, whether it is working with the staff to make sure that the organization is effective. So that's what you do as a group, and that's what you do at a higher level. I actually don't use the word oversight because it's too often confused with supervision, and the board is not the staff supervisors. On the support side, which is the right side, we as board members, I actually chair a board, we are individual volunteers, and we are managed by the staff. Any advice or ideas that we have can be taken or not by the staff. And one of the reasons I like to mention this is that I think it clarifies and frames a core purpose of the board. And I see boards getting a lot of trouble when the governance role is confused with the support role.
Yes.
And an individual board member tortures a staff member by thinking all of their fundraising ideas should be acted on immediately.
There is a power dynamic to be aware of when when the board and the staff are overlapping. And then can I add that as you're going about the work of shifting your board from good to great, there might need to be an investment on the organization's part in resources into skills development from your board members and looking at even where there are weak points and where board members want to grow. You might need to hire coaches and consultants, and there needs to be that space on the organization's end to be able to say, okay, we may not be able to bring in individual people right now who can do this, but X board member wants to become a better fundraiser. So maybe we should have a series of fundraising trainings for them. And that's just another way where you can look at the resources of the organizations, the talents of your board, and see where there's a way where you guys can grow together, get better together.
A couple of more comments about purpose. Boards are also vanguards, and that means we're looking to the future and, again, partnering with staff to do strategic planning, to look ahead at what are the opportunities, what are the threats, and both participating in and supporting the organization is making the most of opportunities and dealing with threats effectively. And the other dimension of purpose is what's our personal purpose in relationship to the board? Because I think when you put those three dimensions of purpose together, and I'm clear on what I'm most excited about personally in serving on a board, that contributes to having a great board. So maybe my personal purpose is to help people and groups make things happen. Maybe my personal purpose relates completely to the mission. I need to be aware of that in the context of my role as a board member and bring it, because that is going to only help further the organization's mission and vision and contribute to being a great board. What's your purpose?
And purpose in life?
Your individual purpose, yeah.
I want to help people reimagine what's possible. I'm a nerd, so that's usually in tech and media and like what stories are being told and how we're hearing them and how we're delivering services. But to circle back to building organizations, I really, and also to throw back to one of the earlier questions is, I think when you're building cultures of anything, like my aspirational dream is to build an organization and build a board where it's a great place to be from. Like, when you meet someone who works at an organization and that organization has like a reputation, and like you're like, oh, this person is great because they're from this specific place. I love boards where like I meet someone who's from a specific board where I'm like, that I've heard superlative things about that board. And I think when you're building a board culture and how you're working and how you're managing the people and recruiting and the intentionality around that is it would be great to have a board where this is a great group to be from. Even as they term out, I would love like an alumni squad of just like people who are networked together from this shared experience of having their leadership developed from an experience that was mutually beneficial to the organization and to them.
Thanks. A couple of questions kind of relating to what we've been talking about. One is a clarifying question. I thought boards shouldn't get involved in program planning, yet it's listed under governance on that governance support model. That is true, but some organizations do engage board members in helping to assess programs, having an internal and external footprint, and providing advice. Particularly, some board members are recruited because they have expertise in a particular mission or program area. But I would say the actual planning is really the staff, and the board participates on a strategic level. And then, I'm sure this is the only person who has this issue with their board. When recruiting new board members who will fundraise, how do you best manage onboarding them with old board members who won't fundraise?
I think the better question is, how do you gracefully exit? if fundraising is a explicit needed like organizational criteria for a board member, and a board member is not meeting it, then the better question would be, how would you address that? Because A players want to roll with A players. So if you're recruiting exceptionally caliber board candidates, and your other board members are all collaboratively a part of the recruiting process, which means your prospective board member is going to be in conversation with the other current board members. Those conversations will signal the current culture of your board. And if that prospective board member picks up that, like, yeah, there's like a 25 raise, but like no one does it. Like, that I'm not gonna take you seriously. So it's like, how do you first then address that, and then you can talk about the attracting great board members who will meet that moment.
And I will say, if you tighten up your recruitment and the expectations piece includes making a significant gift, either with a kind of dollar amount or guideline or significant to people's finances, and to raise money, and that's specific. Generally, my experience is people who don't want to raise money will move themselves off the board. And you're also starting a process when you change expectations. And so you can kind of create an intentional culture, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And you can let the board in general know this is what we are moving our board to. And that's really serving notice to people, board members who don't want to fundraise. Because I think the reality is that is such a core element of a board member's role that whether they want to stay on a board or not, it ultimately doesn't work. It drags the board down. I think we had a question here, and then we'll move on. Yes?
Yeah. And because we're involved in the fair trade world, we're really opposed to that.
Right.
And so reasons, for value reasons. And so I'm just curious about your input about, right now people are asked to physically go through big skips being on our board. That's how we post it. So I'd really love to know ideas of how to look at that in real ways.
Well, I think there are many ways of approaching it. I have some consultant colleagues who say don't ever have, a dollar amount or a minimum, and some colleagues who say should always do that. I think it really depends on the organization, and for some organizations, as a initial tool to just move the board into thinking and relating very specifically to their fund development commitment, it's useful, and it might be sunsetted after a few years. The other thing is, I think a lot of groups, and please jump in, really don't communicate in a very full and multidimensional way to the board around their fundraising commitment. And this is where you need your board chair, your development chair, to both model and frame that. So when you just say a couple of sentences, we ask our board members to make a gift that is significant in relationship to their financial circumstances, it's not enough. So you might give examples of what that means. Also follow up so that there's more individualized discussions with board members. And you might, some boards I work with actually list board gifts by name, and for some it's not appropriate to their culture. But I think it's certainly possible to list specific board gifts without associating names with them, to give people an idea of the range of what's given. So those are just a few ideas, but I think it requires a real conversation both on a meeting level and individually, so that the organization, both the ED and the board leadership, is actually modeling fearlessness or walking with your anxiety around fundraising, not just saying two sentences and then scurrying into the dark.
I'm a huge fan of being unapologetic about the fact that we need resources to do our work, and two, at least, at the very least, set the floor. Don't set the ceiling to what you're asking people to raise, but set the floor. And the floor could be set through, we ask people to make contributions that are significant to their individual. Like, that is very diplomatic. I'm like, minimum this amount. And then the third thing I want to offer, and this also might also help with the diversity question, is reimagine new ways for people to meet that. Like, saying somebody needs to give $20,000 a year, that is a big, scary number that equals, like, most of my undergraduate education. So, like, actually coming up with, like, a sheet of inventful ways that people have been able to do that, having house parties, hosting dinners where, like, each person gives, there's a ticket price or what have you, making a little kit, and at least that will help spark other ideas. It'll spark generative thinking on how board members can meet that. And then also say, like, hey, this is $20K over a 3-year board term. So let's, like, talk about how we can make that into digestible bites and, like, sit down and make an individual board development plan with your board members, which is something like we're doing in Exhale. We're having people set goals and managing it on a, like, interactive spreadsheet. That makes me so happy. And one of that is saying, like, hey, if you're saying you want to raise X amount, you want to raise a major gift, let's reverse engineer and break this down and make this smaller pieces. So that will likely help.
Yes, back there, and then Carol, then we'll move on.
So it's great that you just said that, because I was like, oh my God, you're kicking out board members just saying they're against fundraising. Some of my biggest fundraisers are boards that were program heavy. They really were experts in that. They thought they knew nothing about fundraising. They were feisty, they were intelligent, they turned out to be great at it. It just took a little sort of sentimental process, including helping them along in doing some training.
Well, and also that goes back to my earlier point about sometimes the organization needs to make an investment in coaching and developing your board. So, like, hiring development coaches. Like, my first year in Exhale's board, you were on development calls with us. You were on our development committee calls. And I was like, oh, cool, that's a thing. But the other boards I've been on that have had scary numbers didn't have that piece. And, I kind of, like, languished. It took me a while to, like, find my footing.
It's kind of an ongoing commitment to that question that we raised around recruiting board members. What do I need to hit the ground running as a board member? And what do I need to continue being effective and engaged? And it is a dance that organizations and board members do together.
So thank you. I had a question. You were talking about reimagining and kind of being creative in terms of the diversity. So just to tell you on that, I'm always interested in creative practices to use for annual priorities that may change over time, where certain board members would be more useful, like, say, this year versus next year, based on priorities. So have you done kind of creative, here's the board, and here's an advisory council, and here's, like, an emeritus kind of group of board? I'm interested in.
I haven't seen, so boards have a very explicit purpose around governance and making sure the health and well-being of the organization is attended to. That is such a clear, mandated, this is what we're here, this is the work we're here to do together. I have seen advisory councils almost universally really poorly defined, and kind of be like the catch-all for, like, everyone else we think is cool and want a label. And so the ones that I see successful are the ones that have very clear, explicit purposes. Those are usually attached to supporting big, major programs or events that are also big fundraiser drives. And what was the other part? Yeah.
If you get on grassrootsfundraising.org, there's a great article that I think Stephanie Roth may have written about advisory groups and boards, and goes into a bit more detail about what she said.
Okay, I didn't have to read the article.
So, I want to hit on a little more specifically about creating an intentional culture, and another piece in the discussion Sabrina and I had about this workshop that we so completely agree with is great boards are strategic boards. So that strategic dimension of thinking and engaging is always switched on, not just when we're doing the organization's strategic plan. So I want to just point you in your packet. You have some actual culture statements and agreements on pages 6 and 7. And if you want to start shifting how your board operates, start having more dynamic meetings. When we talk about strategy, we'll talk about creating that kind of agenda in just a moment. Have a board meeting or have a board meeting where you talk about what kind of board do we want to be and what kind of culture would support the kind of board we want to be. And then you can have a quick partnership exercise where people answer the question, what kind of culture do we have now? And what I've seen is that boards are really pretty honest about that. Well, we're actually not that engaged, and half of us are answering email on our smartphones during the meetings. So when you have at least a few honest board members who will call that out, and you list it, and then you say, what kind of board do we want to be? And you can use the samples in here. That's how you start changing the way a board functions and moving a board toward being a great board. So I would just point you to those examples, and either whether it's at a board retreat or, as I said, you begin it at part of a board meeting, to really look at your current culture and start becoming intentional is really powerful. And it goes hand in hand with doing an annual board self-evaluation, which we will talk about in a moment. Anything you want to add to that? Okay. So strategy-wise, being a strategic board, there's, again in your packets, examples of an actual board of directors agenda. That's on page 7. And on page 8 is a development committee agenda. And they're real agendas, they're not Exhale's agendas. But I actually want to kick it to you. Why don't you take the lead on this one, because we're working really actively with the Exhale board to strengthen their strategic talks.
Yes, yeah.
Take it away.
It is like, I think intentionality is like the word of the day. Is that you realize the gap, and then you realize the gap, name it, define it, and then you start to make a reverse engineer plan to address it. And so one of the things is that, we need strong strategic leadership. How can we support our board members in showing up as strong strategic leaders? And one of the things that we realize is that, okay, we need to have a lot of support around our meetings and make sure we have clear expected desired outcomes. The questions that we want to have surfaced, like we need to, know what those are. Like, what are we trying to answer in these specific discussion points? And this has turned into Aspen and I have fun a lot, like we're having a pre-meeting about a meeting. We make a facilitator's agenda, which is like very detailed, like what we're trying to hit when, why, and what the outcome needs to be. We have the actual meeting, and then we have a meeting after the meeting to talk about how that meeting went. And then also, like, what happened, what we learned, and what action needs to be taken. So it is truly it has created a culture of continuous learning among the top leadership or executive team, and then also continuous adaptation and seeing and as dynamics change. And I think we've gotten so much done in such a short amount of time because of it. A lot of times people have board meetings like quarterly or board meetings where you come together, and then like the stuff happens in the room, and then they kind of just nothing happens in between. This involves a lot of action in between, and so I feel like we're getting a lot more done as a result of it.
So I want to point out a few things about these agendas, but I also want to kind of point to the through line that we're attempting to create with beginning with how board members are recruited. We're going to talk a little bit about onboarding and orientation, that continues this process of leadership development and engagement. And then how meetings are approached. How many meetings have you been to where it's all reporting out and it's passive? The personnel committee reports out and the development committee reports out, and there's very little discussion. There's head nodding, and there's maybe after a while glazed eyes. So board meetings and an active board chair and CEO are critical to an engaged board. Because if you think about the board meeting as when the board comes together as a stewardship governance body, the board meeting really sets the tone for how engaged they are. Yeah. So you've probably noticed that there are meeting outcomes on the agenda on page 7. There's a consent agenda, so time isn't wasted on routine items. There's actually in the far columns a purpose for each agenda item. And then this particular organization, for those of you who are familiar with governance as leadership, wanted to make sure that each of the 3 dimensions, generative, strategic, and fiduciary, was addressed as appropriate to different agenda segments. And in terms of chairing a meeting effectively, when you have a purpose and a board meeting wants to brainstorm or take a discussion in a different direction, a purpose kind of empowers a board chair or committee chair to say, our purpose here is actually we're going to come to a decision. We're not going to brainstorm ideas. That'll be up to the staff to implement once we make our decision. Anything you want to point out?
This is my weak point. I hate structure and times. I'm terrible at actively terrible at facilitating meetings, and I think we talk about something for as long as we need to talk about until it's done, and not other people live like that. So a growth thing that I've had to do is articulate that many times to my other board members, and so people who actually respect time, check me, and so when we're running meetings, we run tight meetings now, and then I have my vice chair texting me with 5-minute warnings, and I'm like, great, because I wasn't looking at my watch. So yeah.
Well, that's part of the right people on the bus. Yeah. So your strength is in tracking time. So you have your vice chair.
I miss all my flights.
Okay,
all of it.
So we have a few suggestions, just simple actions to take to start moving your board from good to great. Then we'll have a few more questions and discussion and give you a little bit of time to work with a tool and figure out in what areas are you strong and in what areas do you need improvement. So I would recommend that you take a look at the rigorous recruitment process sample and figure out what might you need to put into place. You don't need to put everything into place. For smaller organizations, it would be hard to do that all at once. But starting with clear, really high expectations, being unapologetic, getting clear on your criteria and priorities, and having a process that reflects the kind of commitment you're asking board members to make, I think, are the 3 critical elements in upping your recruitment game.
Oh, that's great.
And then teeing up your board for that strategic dimension of functioning. I would look at the meeting agendas and adapt them as you feel they'll be useful to your organization. If you're an ED, if you're a board chair, if you're a board member, go to the board and say we're going to change up how we approach our board meetings. And set outcomes and look at the different agenda items and ask yourselves what are the bigger questions that need to be answered. Because you can, even with the budget, good boards and average boards say, great, we met our actuals, next item. And great boards say,
how did we meet them? Are we on pace to meet them for the next quarter? What do we need to do to adjust? Is this being staffed appropriately?
Exactly, thank you. And then I think clarifying, creating your leadership pipeline is really important, and that inherently is addressed by how you approach recruitment, and then making sure that the people you put in positions of leadership on your committees are really going to lead. You're not putting them there because they want to or to reward them, but you're really making a match between what the organization needs and people's skills. And then when you have strong chair leadership, if there's some delicacy around that, that can be communicated about. I would also really recommend a real nominations process in conjunction with terms and term limits, so that those people where you want to graciously move them off the board, where the expectations have changed and you have resistant board members, if you have a real nominations process that supports board movement and refreshment. And then the final thing that I want to recommend is a board self-evaluation, so that the board looks at its own effectiveness. There's a couple of simple tools on page 11 and 12. There's a sample evaluation for individual board members and for the board as a whole. Most groups adapt it and put it on SurveyMonkey. And again, I find most board members are pretty honest. And so to have them self-evaluate, to aggregate it, which you can do easily through SurveyMonkey, is an appropriately humbling experience for boards, where they can celebrate what they're doing well, and they can really take a hard look at what they're self-assessing they need to do better at.
I think that last piece about self-evaluation is the one that I think a lot of boards skip, and I really encourage you all not to do that, because I think it can reveal blind spots that you might not see because you're in the day-to-day.
Do you do these together?
Yeah, yes.
I got a survey monkey once. Would you send that both?
Oh, definitely. By the way, I'm using just a PowerPoint guide for this discussion, and you're going to get copies of it after this workshop from the fabulous Natasha. So let's. Do we have questions from our live streamers? And then some questions from our live audience here. How do you shift a culture where the board believes that fundraising, nobody has this problem, solely the responsibility of the development director, development department, to one where fundraising is shared? I know you're going to jump on this one, right?
Shared leadership, like that. I mean, okay, so that is, okay, the strategic goal is you want to create a board that has a sense of shared leadership around fundraising. Then you need to drive that from your board. Are you setting goals? Are those being met? I mean, the best thing to do is to model it. It's really, the whole creating, this is somebody else's problem to solve. It's a really fast way to create a culture of resentment. And not in my backyard.
And I also think there's, again, going back to the foundation of the board, this also relates to how people are recruited, how they're oriented. And I realized I thought I had put some sample orientation materials in this packet, but I didn't. So if anyone wants that, just email me and I'll send them to you. I have some great samples. But many board members aren't clear on what their role is, and some of them don't want to be clear on what their role is. So when you are you've recruited new board members and you're onboarding them, that is a great time to. I've seen board chairs require the whole board to go to orientations.
The way that question is phrased, though, it makes me think that they might need to burn it and start. The whole, how do you create, this is the development director. That sounds really painful and hard.
It is, yeah. Well, I've worked with groups where they have kind of fired their boards and started new. But that's another workshop.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Curious. Our board's national, and my guess is a lot of people here have local projects where you are able to meet face to face. So just any additional suggestions when you're national and you're meeting by Skype or something like that for those meetings, except for just how to
So the question is, how do you keep a national board that meets by Skype or conference call engaged? You're in luck because Exhale is a national board.
Yes. Well, and also I sit on other national boards as well. So I can. One is, do you have do you meet in person at all? Like, do you have like an annual everyone in? Okay, so that's great. That already will create like shared sense of we're working together. The other thing is we use video conferencing. Google Hangouts or GoToMeetings is like we used for an entire year. GoToMeeting has like a vendor, like a participant cap, but also setting, like not doing conference calls. That was also something that we learned when we were doing our strategic assessment of a meeting after a meeting. Was like, okay, we're gonna have to get on video calls for our next one. Making sure that people get on those calls 10 minutes before the meeting starts. Because a lot of times people will only, hit the link at 7 p.m. and then, I have to install a thing, and it's just like it moves everything back. So just like and just like frankly, like we want to respect everybody's time. We are going to start on time. Modeling that really effectively. Making sure there's this website called Mixergy. He has an infographic called "How to Look Good in a Webcam," because like people will sit like they look like they're in caves, and so like just looking, sharing that maybe, like, and it's a cartoon that's like how to be well lit. Make sure you don't have programs running in the back of your computer. And I send that to everyone I have to do video conferences with. Yes. Yeah. Please. So the two-part question is, what about youth diversity on the board? And then the other question was about how often boards should meet. Oh, okay. How often should board members meet prior to the meeting? So on the youth diversity point, the whole having a national board that doesn't have to be in the same space and meeting, using technology to meet virtually, removes the constraints of needing to pay for plane tickets to fly places, which removes the constraints of only being able to serve on a board if you're a particular type of person who makes a particular salary. And one of the boards I sit on that doesn't do that, they meet like 2 or 3 times a year. Everyone flies into the city for it. Only really rich people are, and it eliminates an entire layer of leadership, and it's really disappointing because they're not cultivating and surfacing up new leaders. So also thinking about like how people are even getting into the room will help meet that youth standard. And then also, youth leadership on boards, it has to be stated as a need for, like, they have to know that's something that they need. What is it? I want to say Goodwill has a really great board development program where they place up and coming leaders in those partner organizations that they serve in preparation of eventually serving on their board, which I think is really smart because it serves their partners and it serves them. I don't remember the second part of the question.
How often board members should meet before the meeting?
It depends. I've seen people have come in the night before. They all get dinner together, and then they go to the meeting, and then they get you can design how you want people to bond around the meetings. At Exhale, we have I think it's we meet all day, and then we plan on getting dinner or something that night, and then there's usually a reception or something, a program for the organization. No. It's dinner the night before. then the meeting, then a reception for the org where we invite other people, where all the other board members are there, and that's a great recruitment tool, by the way. And then the next day we usually continue our meeting and then we
So I have a feeling we have an evaluation tool for just doing a snapshot of where your board is. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I did it at 1 o'clock in the morning before I left for a business trip. And on below the table is a scoring column, and 90 to 100 should be 35 to 40. 75 to 89 should be 30 to 35. 60 to 74 should be 20 to 30. And 59 or less should be 20 or less. What can I say? I was an English major. Should I repeat that? Yes. Okay. So 90 to 100 should be 35 to 40. 75 to 89 should be 30 to 35. 60 to 74 should be 20 to 30. And 59 or less should be 20 or less. And I'm going to correct this and send it to Natasha, so you'll get one email with the PowerPoint and the correct evaluation tool. But I'm guessing that rather than evaluating your own organization and sharing action steps, you'd rather just ask questions and keep talking. Is that right? Okay. So do we have any live stream questions? Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I think it's a little specialized. We think this is specialized. We can talk to the live stream audience after the program. Questions? Yes.
In the for-profit world, it's common to have people who are being paid by the organization.
Yes.
In the nonprofit world, of course, a board is a and a situation came up in my organization where there was a 500 representatives from everyone loved and wanted to make a permanent board member. And one of our governance committee people went through the list and said, you just cannot ask a faculty person to volunteer. It'd be like asking them to do your job for you. I just wondered what your experience was.
I think it really depends on the organization and the scope of the role and whether they're appropriate for the board. It's also a bit of a conflict of interest. That's the bigger problem. That's the bigger problem that I would see. I think if you want a faculty voice on your board, there's a few different ways of approaching that. One is just to invite them to participate in aspects of the meeting where they're needed. The other is they might participate in an appropriate committee or a task force. But I think it's more the conflict of interest than anything else. It's like having a staff person on the board that is then setting policy on salary and so forth. It just doesn't work.
Well, and also that logic is broken. It's like asking someone to do their job for free. It's not, because it's different. Your purpose of the board is to oversee the health and responsibility of the organization. So, I'm a CEO. It's like, no, I'm a board chair. I'm technically doing my job for free. That doesn't make any sense. No, your function on the board is different than your function at your professional capacity. So that's decoupling that. And then also understanding that there are many different ways. If there's a great leader that you want to have contribute to your board, there's a menu of options for them to be able to show up, including having them train, having them show up for particular committees or task forces, or present at particular meetings or what have you.
But I think there's a very interesting, deeper question that sort of underlies this issue, which is, aside from personality and the fact that everybody loves this faculty member, what are they surfacing or bringing to the conversation? What perspective do they have that makes the board feel this way? So I think that's the deeper question, and if you approach it that way, you might be able to, work out a way to have that perspective represented or meet that need that that is appropriate. Just back there.
I have seen that play out as well, and I think it's amazing that you said moving from customer service to partnership, because that is exactly what I wrote down as you were talking. And I think a really great way to approach that would be to have a conversation with your CEO or whoever is your head, and game plan a strategy on how to make that shift happen. This is where we are now, where I feel like you are serving at the whim of these well contributing board members, and that's legitimate. This is where I think we can shift this dynamic to, so it's more healthy for us as an organization, and it's more productive for those board members. That requires a real investment from your CEO, because ultimately, in terms of the power dynamic, it's customer service because you feel like they could fire you at any time, but they are your boss's boss. Not your boss. So that's why you have to work in partnership with your boss to make sure that you guys are aligned going forward on how to create a more healthy dynamic between development staff and your board.
So we have just a few questions from live stream, and then we'll need to wrap it up. I think you should take this one. How long should a board chair stay on his chair?
For all long-term ones. No, I have my own leadership goals, and so I have specific things I know. My term on 2 3-year terms. I'm in my third year, and so a week or so ago, I was making my own personal 3-year goals for myself, and one of them was to make sure I am going to leave this organization in a more healthy, sustainable place, and so whatever the terms but actually, having your chair have conversations about that, and knowing that in healthy, sustainable place. Okay, what does that mean? Reverse engineer those goals. Sustainable. Who's coming behind me? Are they going to be prepared to succeed? And so, thinking about the leadership pipeline for your board chair leadership it's 2 years out, a year and a half out from now. We're doing it now. So,
I think a 1-year term for a board chair officer is not enough. So I think 2-year terms, renewable once. I think that if you have a board chair, I worked with a group where they had the same board chair for 20 years, and it pretty much destroys your leadership pipeline. So even if they're a good board chair, it's not good for the health of the organization.
As a regular board member, it took me 1 full year on the board to feel like I knew what we were talking about, in our board meetings. And when I said that in one of our board meetings, one of my other colleagues who came as a cohort, we came on board at the same time. She was like, "I'm so glad you said that. I feel the same way. It took me a year to figure out what was going on."
So here, you can just answer this as a list.
What on the show?
Yeah. So, what types of continuing education activities for board members have worked well to develop their good to great skills?
That's a great question. So one is having conversations. How do you want to grow? So that will help surface board members' individual goals. So, and then from there you can pull themes and then look for classes and continuing ed specifically for that. I knew in April we were bringing on new board members, and I knew we were doing a fundraising campaign this year. 3 new board members who all want to become better fundraisers, but don't have hard fundraising skills. So July, they got a fundraising training from Lisa Hoffman, and now they're in the middle of doing that campaign. So that was a clear, continuing ed. And then we have other board members who are just I work in tech, they're interested in tech. If I see things come across my transom on scholarship opportunities for coding classes and what have you, they get it. We have one board member who's doing a speaking tour right now. Amy Cuddy, who gave the TED Talk on power posing, wrote a really great book, and so I bought it and I sent it to her before she went on her speaking tour. So knowing what's going on with the organization, being kind of aware of the world, that dovetails nicely.
Okay, there's a last question here, and then I want to just ask you guys and live stream audiences just to give us one sentence on something you're going to do to move your board from good to great. My non-fundraising board has grandfathered into the bylaws that they don't have to fundraise when new board members do. Good idea, bad idea. It's a bad idea. Also, usually you don't have fundraising requirements in bylaws. It's in governance policies.
Yeah.
I think they should recruit a kick-ass lawyer with experience with nonprofits to overhaul the bylaws and then integrate rigorous recruitment and onboarding and orientation and et cetera, et cetera.
That made me snort laugh.
So just really quick, let's hear a few things you want to put into place or get started to move your board. Yes.
Have the board review its current give or get requirements to consider some people that are having trouble meeting expectations of others, and discuss the benefits from or the probability of having an individual giving program developed for each board member so that the overall effectiveness of the board fundraising can be tracked and evaluated.
So review the practice around board fundraising and giving and moving to a more individualized approach. Anything from live stream?
Okay, cool.
Anyone else? Yes.
I'm going to do this survey monkey evaluation tool self-assessment as soon as possible for the board, and then follow up with one-on-one conversations.
Someone back there? Yes. What else? Yes, Janice.
Have a conversation. What kind of board do you want to be?
Have the conversation, what kind of board do you want to be? And then we had another person in our audience, our participants here saying he's going to move forward on recruiting youth board members immediately. So I want to draw your attention to the bibliography on page 2. So a really great assortment of books. The Best of the Board Cafe by Jan Masoka, who former CEO of Compass Point. Boards That Love Fundraising by Bob Zimmerman, one of our colleagues who passed away a few years ago. Really wonderful person. Governance as Leadership. If the generative, strategic, and fiduciary dimensions piqued your interest, it's an entire book on it. One of my very favorite books is Nonprofit Boards That Work by Maureen Robinson. It's very practical. And the Ultimate Board Members book by Kay Sprinkle Grace is written kind of from the perspective of being a board member, not for CEOs to get their board members to be great board members. If you'd like to be on my email list, you get maybe 8 or 10 emails a year about events like this. Just give me a business card. And if you want any of the materials I mentioned, just jot down on the back what you want, and I'll get them to you in the next couple of days. Any last words? Good luck.
Thanks for coming. This was really great.
Thank you. And if any of you want to discuss any of your expectations a little bit more, get other ideas, we'll be here another few minutes. Bye, live stream.
Yay.